Are you loving our journey together? Then you'll definitely enjoy the Podcast Connection Network alongside Hunter Allen of Everything is Connected and Heather Harrington from Hot Mess Espresso. We're bringing a rich mix of stories and insights. Each show adds its own flavor to our vibrant network. Dive in and explore. Your next podcast obsession is waiting. Join us in this ever growing community of authentic voices. The link is in my link tree or in the description of this episode. The content provided in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The intention of the host and guests is to spread love and awareness. Always seek the advice of your physician or trusted healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard in this podcast. Hi, and welcome to the Connection Over Perfection podcast. I am Amber McCrae, your therapeutic nutritionist and host. Join me on a holistic healing journey where we explore the power of nutrition and connection for your overall well-being, where we embrace connection over perfection. Hey, amazing souls. Welcome back to Connection Over Perfection. I am Amber McCrae, your host, and I'm super excited to have a heart-to-heart today with this lovely guest, Jessica Sosin, an incredibly talented associate marriage and family therapist who's redefining the way we think about relationships and healing. Jessica's journey is something out of a storybook. Imagine this, a young, curious mind at UC San Diego diving deep into the mysteries of human behavior. But that's just the beginning. Jessica didn't just study people, she felt their stories, saw the unspoken truths hiding in plain sight. So, fast forward through years of soul searching, body work, and transformative dive into counseling psychology, and here she is, a beacon of hope for couples everywhere. Her approach, fill in the gaps, isn't just a method, it's a mantra for all of us seeking deeper and more authentic connections. We met through a mutual friend, have had little chats about our healing and our work, and I knew immediately that there was so much more to explore. This episode is that opportunity for me and for all of you to really dive in and get to know her better. So grab a cup of tea, get cozy, and let's unravel the magic of mindfulness, the power of somatics, and the beauty of raw, real relationships. Jessica, welcome. We are so honored to have you here today with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for the nice, welcoming introduction.
Oh, yes, it's one of my favorite parts. So, Jessica, what inspired your transition from psychology studies to becoming a therapist specializing in mindfulness and couples counseling?
Yeah, so I think it's taken a long, kind of twisty, windy road. I think I always, from a young age, was interested in human behavior and relationships. And I think I would see things that were sort of under the surface that people didn't seem to notice. I would see the nuances of kind of what people were saying behind what they were saying, or I would see what people were saying with their body language. I don't know. I seem to have this affinity for kind of noticing things that sometimes other people didn't seem to notice, or that I couldn't tell that other people noticed. And then I think I kind of got absorbed into life, regular life, and kind of forgot mostly about it. I was a dancer throughout high school, and I got pretty into college life and just kind of all of that. But I think it was always there, that sort of curiosity and interest in sort of human behavior and kind of what's deeper and beneath the surface. So I did do my BA in psychology and was totally fascinated, like Psychology 101, took my first course and was like totally like, oh my God, I would like say to all my roommates, like, they're like, we're trying to study. And I'd be like, no, you have to like listen to this. So I was so interested in it. So, and then post college, I kind of fell into my own therapy journey. And that was really the beginning of my own kind of deep dive into like, who am I and what do I want out of life? And what is this thing called life? And how do I make decisions for myself? And like just a lot of questions. So I took a pretty big deep dive into my own sort of world, my own journey. And yeah, just spent many years in, or several years, I should say, in therapy and doing kind of meditation retreats. And then I think I came out the other side of that pretty like excited to help other people and sort of excited about like what I'd learned about humans and felt like I'd learned a lot about humans. And then, as life does, like the pandemic, and I mean, there's always stuff to like, there's always stuff being thrown at us. But I'd say, kind of amidst post pandemic life, during pandemic, I think I was still able to find a way to kind of help people, and my specialties started to come out in their own way. Like I started to really notice what parts of counseling I was good at, and I really started like working with couples. And I think part of what I love working with couples is that when I'm with two people in the same space, I can sort of track their body language and try to help them figure out like what is this person saying and what are they trying to tell their partner, and is their partner able to hear them and actually like read their body language, or are they, because often we're so in our own world that we can't, like that gets in the way, right? But I think that's, as a therapist, that's sort of what you're looking for. So then I can try to help them. Well, did you hear what he just said? Or this is what he's trying to say. So it's like, how do we help people understand? Like we all have these nuanced worlds inside of us, right? So I think just trying to help people like understand what that is and what they're trying to communicate. That's kind of a long answer to your question, but
No, that's perfect. I absolutely love that. And what I think I hear you saying is that you've just been really fascinated and you've found that you are really good at, like you said, being able to read between the lines or just get a sense of what people are trying to say when they don't have the words. So
yeah.
really being able to come up with the words for people, and especially like you said in these couples counseling session, you're really able to be attuned with them and read their body language and help them find words when they don't really have words.
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes it's almost like being a translator in a way,
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
because it's like, yeah, if people don't have all those skills. Like I've spent years studying this stuff and practicing and learning and practicing on myself and practicing on other people. So it's like people don't always have that language. It really is kind of a
It
language.
is, and I think that that's, I don't know about for you, the very intuitive part of therapy and just being able to feel your way through almost what people's emotions, what they're saying, and being able to take
Mhm.
that in and then, like you said, a whole different language, translate it into something that they can digest and understand.
Yeah.
It's like alchemy.
Yeah, like, I was gonna say that's where the creativity really comes in, and that's part of what I love
Yeah,
about it is, like, I find these things, it's very creative, and, like, when I'm in a session, I start to, like, pick up stuff. It's sort of like I'm watching and I'm listening, and I start picking up things and I start pulling them out, and then I kind of regurgitate them back out, like, "Oh, that's what you're saying." And then sometimes they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying." Like, they don't even really know because 'cause we're sort of complex
right.
beings. So, and I think sometimes that's where the sort of somatic piece or mindfulness piece comes in, because it's not just our thoughts. Like, our thoughts is part of it, but it's our body language, it's our
Mhm,
expression, it's our so I don't want to use the word somatic. Sometimes it's like, well, where are you feeling that? Or how are you feeling
mhm.
that? Or what does that look like? Does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Like you can kind of help use these different like languages to express what we're experiencing, not just like a one dimensional kind of thing.
I love that. I love that you say that it's this like multi-dimensional, like you said, it can like colors. What does that look like? What does that feel like? And I think that that's again really cool, and where like you were saying that creativity comes in and really taking therapy and healing where most people it is one dimensional. It's these
Hmm.
words, all these words, and where you
Hmm.
can take it and transform it into what does that feel like,
Hmm.
and it feels different. It's a different experience, and I absolutely love that. I think that that's so fascinating, and I think that um that gives life a different life
Hmm.
to the healing
Yeah, it gives
journey.
like a dimensionality to it, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love that. Um and also with that, you were talking about somatics, and because when somebody says something, they don't even consciously know what's happening sometimes with their body or their eyes or their shoulders. So they
Yeah.
can say, "Oh, like I'm happy." But then you're like, you say that you're happy, but your body says it might not be. What's going on with that,
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
just being able to, and a lot of times people don't even, they're like, "Oh, I didn't even know I did that."
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that that's so cool. And it is a different language, like you said.
Mhm.
So thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing that. We could
Yeah.
talk about that for hours. Like,
Yeah.
on a psychology level, it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, it is
Um,
fascinating.
so kind of along those lines, your in your work, you mentioned that fill in the gaps for clearer communication. Can you share some strategies or insights, from your practice that our listeners could maybe apply or try to improve their communication with loved ones?
Yeah, a lot of it, this is making me think more about like a lot of it comes down to like willingness and vulnerability and how much of that is there. Cause I work with so many different types of people, like individuals and couples. And sometimes like I'll notice with a couple, like one half of the couple, there's so much willingness, so much vulnerability, so much like excitement to do this process, and then maybe the other half there's not. So then I have to really look at like what's stopping that person, or how do I communicate with that person in a more like gentle way so that I'm not pushing them over that. So there's a lot going on in the room, especially when I work with couples. I mean, there's a lot with one individual, but a lot more with a couple, which was part of why I love it, because it's so dynamic. It's also very challenging. So like sometimes I'll work with, this is just totally one example, right? There's a million different ways, but like I have a person right now who has like a theater background. So I'm like, well, how do we use that to help you communicate? So well, they're used to like acting. So sometimes we'll play with that arena. Like, what is it like to act out something you're trying to communicate? And we might do something with like body language in that way. Like, what is it like to move forward? What is it, like towards your partner? What is it like to pull away? Sometimes I'll play with that. Like even over Zoom, I'll play with that. Like I'll move my chair like back if I sense that like somebody needs space and I'm too close to them. And then maybe they're able to speak something that they didn't feel like they could speak, because now there's more space from them because I'm back here. And then I can like receive something they're saying. So it's so dynamic and creative. There's like a million different ways to play with like what I call fill in the gaps. And what I mean by fill in the gaps really is just helping the parts of communication that are getting lost and kind of dropped. And so then when they're dropped, we've lost the thread. We don't know where we are. What were we trying to say? What was this person trying to say? So I'll often try to like pick it up again. So that's what I mean by fill in the gap. So we can have more of this through line, more of this connection, rather than like where we're just missing huge chunks of the other person or ourselves.
So that's super cool. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding, and the listeners can grasp it. Is that, are you saying that you use different modalities based on the individual person to try to help them give language
Yes,
to what they're trying to say in
exactly.
order to be able to communicate and things aren't being lost, like you said?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I'll try to tune in, like, who is this person? Like when I get a new client or I have a consultation, I'm trying to figure out who is this person. I want it to me when I say who is this person, I'm not just looking at the words they wrote, like they're reaching out for therapy, let's say. So I'm actually, who is this person in myself? And then I start looking and watching, and then I might pull things like, oh wow, they have a theater background. That's interesting. So maybe it's just something to work with. So I might ask them about that. Like, is that one way you might communicate? So it's like, I'm trying to figure out who is this person? How do I connect to them? And how do they show up in the world in a way that they can communicate who they are?
I love that. I love that you have taken something that has been around for so long and that also can be very blanketed and made it very personal
Hmm.
and really catered it to each individual that you work with.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. I love that. That's so beautiful. And major kudos because that's not easy and that is a lot of time and energy
Yeah.
and work in each of your clients really being able to understand and really be able to see them, which
Mhm.
I think creates safety in itself when they're coming to you.
Yeah.
And when that safety is established, they're more likely to be vulnerable and
Yeah.
open up and
Yeah. And true. And I think that's sort of my gift, you know. I think that's what I do well. And it's not easy. And like I, use all those self-care tools and make sure I'm,
hmm,
all that kind of stuff. And I'm still learning all the time. So sometimes I'll miss people, like if they're a really intricate client, or I'm having like I sometimes I have clients and I'm still learning them. Like, yeah, I've been doing this a long time and I'm intuitive, so I can pick things up quick, but it doesn't mean that I always know everything, or it doesn't mean that I always get it right every time, right? Sometimes I miss somebody and then I'm like, oh, that's not what you were saying. Can you try to articulate what you were saying? Like sometimes, I mean, we could go off on a million tangents, but that's where the sort of rupture, I don't know if you're familiar with rupture and repair. That's a big term in the counseling world because sometimes there's a rupture. We
hmm,
don't understand, right? And then
right.
we have to come back and sort of repair. So that's, anyways, I can go off on a million tangents,
No,
but
yeah. Well, and that's I don't know like what you do. That's like the checking in. Is that how you're feeling? And then
yeah,
that gives them an opportunity to say, "Hey, yeah," or "No, we kind of missed the mark." And then
yeah,
you circle back, you start over. You're like, "Okay, let's let's see
yeah.
where we missed this."
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Was it after COVID that you really said that you found like your gift? You kind of settled into your gift?
No, I mean, I think that it's been going on for 20 years, but I think that, I mean, it's been 20 years since I've been in this arena in some way or the other, whether it's like, I mean, I worked with teenagers in a counseling, as a residential counselor, like right out of college. And then I became a massage therapist, but I worked with like healing modalities with massage, something called Rosen method. So it's like deeper. Like, so I've been doing this for 20 years, but I think it's that it's always changing shape and form. And there was something about COVID and the pandemic that like brought things on Zoom, and that's had its drawbacks, but it's also had its perks as well, because I'm able to like be in my own space, and then somehow when I'm like working with somebody, it's different. It's like, I guess it's just that it's always unfolding in a new way, or I'm learning things about my own work, or that I'm learning things about my own specialties that kind of are always like changing shape a little bit, if that makes sense. I don't know if it's
Yeah, I think I hear you saying that really it's an accumulation
yeah,
of just all the things that you've been through, all the different experiences and like you said, like with COVID, it really changed the dynamic of the counseling sessions, which gave you something new to work
yeah,
with,
something
maybe.
different.
And so, just, yeah, finding different things or ways to be able to be attuned because you're not in that energy, you're not in their
Yeah,
space.
exactly.
And so, finding different ways to really connect with them and be attuned. Is that close?
Yeah, I think that's true. And also like because I'm pretty energetically sensitive, and I think I've gotten more energetically sensitive doing this work, which I don't know if that's always a good thing for
Right,
me.
right.
So it's kind of like there's this balance, but there's something about like being in my own space and working over the screen that kind of allows me to like keep my energy over here
Mhm.
while I can still really see the other person. So I think in some ways it works well. Sometimes I miss working in person, and I am actually starting to go back to work in person more, but it's just interesting how the different modalities. I would imagine like somebody who's an artist who like either does painting or who does drawing, like there's these different ways to do it, right?
Right, right.
So,
And
yeah.
that is what I love hearing from you is that you've just combined all these different modalities to work with the individual and I think that that's super beautiful. So,
Hmm.
how do you find mindfulness and somatics? How do you find that those contribute to a deeper connection with ourselves and others?
Yeah. So my own sort of journey and life process has included periods of meditation, and even like in my 20s I would do these like 5-night silent retreats, which
Mm,
were like pretty like, you know, you're really just, it's kind of nice in a way because you get a break from like the world and you're just really like focused here. I mean, it can be a lot if you have trouble spending that much time with yourself, but like,
It sounds lovely right now. I'll take one of those, please.
yeah. Yeah, totally. So I think like that naturally I sort of incorporate that into my work. So like I'll help people, I don't know, it can look different ways depending on the client. Like sometimes it might be like halfway through session if I notice that somebody is really getting like activated or their energy is getting really out here. We might take like a 2-minute pause and like do a little meditation and just slow down, like come back into the body. And when I use the term mindfulness, to me, that's just helping people become more aware of themselves. Like, what is your hand doing right now? Like, how is your breath? Like, what are you feeling? I mean, that's really mindfulness, right? Like, some people have tons of awareness and other people don't. Everybody's in a different way around that, right? So, some people are super aware of themselves, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, right?
Yeah,
So I think that just because I have like a background in that, that it kind of naturally like makes its way into my work, I think,
that's awesome.
if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say is that, again, it just goes back to that individual and really being attuned with them and knowing, hey, I sense that they're, becoming elevated, or, let's take a few deep breaths, or just being aware of their body. And like you said, knowing your client, knowing who you're working with, is this something that's comfortable for this person? Some people that can cause a lot of anxiety. And so knowing that and
Yeah.
being able to navigate that. So that's what you're saying, right? It's just
Yeah.
really being attuned with the client and the
Yeah.
person and knowing
Right.
when to use what.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm not going to push somebody who has like no meditation practice. I'm not going to be like, okay, your homework is to meditate an hour
Right.
a day. Like that just wouldn't make any
Right.
sense, right? But if I have somebody that has like no meditation experience but they want to learn it, I'll tell them to start with 5 minutes a day,
Right.
you know? So it's sort of like trying to meet them where they're at and then just see a possibility beyond where they're at, just even 1% different so I can guide them towards that, you know. So that's the fun part of my work, is like getting to watch people grow. I mean, I've had clients who I've had for 5+ years and I've watched them like transform, or I watched them turn into like more mature, grounded, open versions of
Mm.
themselves.
So, in talking about somatics, can you tell us a little bit more on the benefits of really being in tune with your body and how that helps in therapy?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of an intricate question. I feel like there's so many ways, but I think being in tune with our body, I mean, I do think sometimes it can be a double-edged sword because that sort of ignorance is bliss. Like sometimes if we're unattuned, we feel like we can just go through life and it's like we don't feel anything. So
Right.
it's like easier in a
Yeah.
way. So I think that sometimes we get, you know, if we get too in tuned or too focused on it, then it can get in our way. So I think there's a balance between like knowing our bodies, what are its limits, like what is it, what do we feed it, what is it like to receive, how much sleep does it need, what do we, you know, like I think everybody's a little bit different, right? So I think there's some benefits that can come with knowing ourselves, you know, and knowing our bodies and being able to be in tune with them. And then sometimes it can be too much if we spend too much time in there, and then we got to get out and like get out of our heads and focus on something else, you know.
Right.
But I think in therapy, I think what helps me the most as a therapist, and I think mainly working with couples, but also with individuals, but more with couples, is that I feel like I'm able to see what's kind of going on beneath the surface. Like I can almost see where they're holding things in their body, or I can see how they're using their body to express themselves or not. And then I can try to help them like fill in the gap. Like I can help them communicate something to somebody else that like I can see that they're trying to do somehow with their body, but they're either not able to fully do it or the person's not able to see it or receive it. And so that's where it comes in handy for me in my
Mm.
work, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And do you think that in working with people who have really become like disconnected with themselves, say they've gone through something really traumatic, usually, a sexual trauma has had people disassociate and really, be disconnected from their body. Do you find that somatics and really having them, recognize where do you feel that in your body is also a really good tool in helping people
Yeah.
reconnect back to themselves
Yeah.
and just as a way of grounding?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I'm working, I mean, I've worked a fair amount with trauma and trauma work. I mean, some like not less, I think, over Zoom or less during the pandemic, but somatics and connecting to the body is a big part of trauma work. And if somebody's really dissociated, you have to bring them back, but you have to do it really carefully and really gently because you don't want to re-traumatize them or totally overwhelm them. So like if I'm working with somebody who's quite dissociated, then it's a multi-layered process of trying to help them come back. I have to know their psychology and their history, and I have to try to help them orient back towards the body and towards the present moment, but in a way that they feel like it's like tolerable. So like little kind of bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, those baby steps and really being that's where that intuitive and being attuned to the person that you're working with and being able to watch their somatics, right? Watch what's happening with their body,
Yeah,
is what I'm talking to them about. Is it bringing them up? Is it calming them down? And really just being
right.
able to read that and understand that.
Yeah.
And I think that this is
Yeah.
really good, and I really want to highlight this for the listeners is that so many people are hungry to find a modality that works across the board. And
Mm,
I don't know if you agree. I would love to hear your thoughts, but I do not believe that there is one modality that is just going to work across the board. And it's really finding
no.
what works for you in that moment. And that is going to
Yeah.
change. And like you said, over your years, finding all these different modalities for yourself and then being able to have this toolkit. And I think that that's really what it's about. What are your thoughts?
I do too. And it can make it hard because I get it. Like people want to know, like even for myself, I've worked had some difficult health um, challenges that have come into my life the last few years, like well after my own sort of therapeutic journey. And it was like, what is this? Like I understand psychology, but I don't know that much about like health or I mean I know about health, but I don't know about like some of these nuances of weird
Mhm.
viruses and things that we can so like and so in my own navigation with that, which is still kind of coming and going from my life, there's it's mysterious sometimes like why things come into our field or into our realms. And I absolutely agree that there's no one, I mean sometimes I wish there was, but there's no one way and there's no one modality. And sometimes you have to try a lot of modalities, and sometimes you have to know when to let go and just surrender and just rest and like watch Netflix or
Right,
like lay on the
exactly.
couch, but I mean, I think that it's amazing that there's so many tools out there. And at the same time, it's true. It's like they're, they all can have their time and place, but it's really knowing like when that is. And it's not easy. It's not an easy thing. So I have a lot of compassion for, I mean, being a human's not
No,
an easy
it's not.
thing. So yeah.
Well,
So
and I
yeah.
love that you said that knowing when to rest and just watch Netflix and chill. And I think that there are so many people on this healing journey, and I think I definitely experienced it. You can have healing burnout. You
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
you can have healing
Especially if you like
yeah.
go on social media and you see stuff everywhere, and I'm just like, oh my god, I need a break from this. Like
Right.
it can be too much. And I mean I love that there's so much awareness these days, and there's so many healers, and there's so much out there. I think it's wonderful, and even that can be totally overwhelming. So I think like sometimes we need to take a break from all of it.
Yes, I definitely agree. And for me, I think also too, it's just so many people, they are so hungry to heal that they also maybe cling on to one modality or don't know a direction. And I think
Mm,
that it's so important to remind people to really take that mindfulness, take that time to just be still and like, hey, what is good for me in this moment right now?
Mhm.
Not anybody else,
Yeah.
not like you said, not anybody else on social media, because you're gonna
Yeah.
be flooded with amazing
Yeah.
tools, amazing people, amazing healers, all of these
Yeah,
things.
and then you can't listen to yourself, but then
Exactly.
you don't know how to listen to yourself. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to like kind of get back to. And that kind of goes back to somatics. It's like, what do you feel about these things? You know? And it just because it can be a really good modality, it may not resonate with you. And if you get this, not right now, you know, it doesn't mean that it's not a great modality or that it's a great
Right.
person.
No. Yeah, it doesn't mean that you're discarding something. It just means it's not right for you right then. That's
Right.
all that it means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Doesn't mean that something's wrong with it or something's bad with it. It just means it's not right for you in that moment.
right. And I think that that's so huge. And I think that that's that part of that mindfulness and that, that somatics that we were talking about. And really, this work is very individualized. And I love that you do that. And I love that you mention that because it's working with the whole person. It's you. You have to find what works for you. And then also find someone who, if you are going to work with a coach, if you are going to work with a therapist, if you are going to work with a counselor, find somebody who is going to see you as a whole. I think
Yeah.
that's so important. And I love that you
Yeah.
mentioned that.
Yeah, I think that resonance is a big important thing,
Yes.
and yeah, being able to resonate with something or someone or some aspect of it or something about it. There has to be some resonance or it's just not going to go anywhere. It's not going to land anywhere.
Yeah, I love that you
So,
brought that up. And I was having a conversation with my mom and then some other people about, people who are looking for a therapist or a counselor or a coach. They feel obligated when they reach out that they have to stay with them, even if it doesn't resonate. And as
mm,
a
yeah.
therapist, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. So I always tell people during the consultation that there's no. I tell them that the journey, the therapeutic journey, is a
Mm,
process and it's a collaboration between me and them, and that there's no one way to do it. I've had people that come for a few sessions and it doesn't feel like a fit, and then they go. Like I don't want them to stay if it doesn't feel like a fit. And usually I can tell if it doesn't feel like a fit. And sometimes I'll even refer them to somebody else because usually if it's not a fit for them, it may not be a fit for me. I mean, sometimes there's things that are a little tricky and take some time and then, okay, now maybe we're in a groove. But there's other times that it's just not. And so I sort of I try to take, I'm not perfect, like it's not, but I try to take my hands off the wheel as much as possible and let things unfold of their own accord. It's hard. Sometimes I notice myself, oh, I really like this
mm,
client. I really want to work with them or something. And then, but it's like I try to let the process itself take its own course. And I've had clients come and go. Like sometimes I've had clients work for 6 months and then be like, I need a break, and then maybe they'll come back in another 6 months, or maybe they want to work with a different modality. I had a client who came for about a year and then she discovered that she was like really drawn towards acupuncture, and she actually started going to school for that and then exploring that, and that became where her focus went. So like I love to watch people's natural way of unfolding, and I try to like co-collaborate in that journey and be along for the ride, and then if it's not a right fit, then it'll take a different turn, and that's okay too. Like there's always clients come and go. So it's like it's not like when somebody leaves, it doesn't mean like usually there I have another client in my inbox.
mm,
So
yeah.
it's like, you know what I mean? And then like if there's slow periods, like sometimes my practice I'll need to, it has its own organic way, I think, if I'm able to let it.
Yeah, I
So
love that. So what I think I hear you saying is that you really try to honor um the person that you're working with and yourself. And so in that, really just recognizing that they're on this journey and you understand because you're on this journey as well and healing
right,
and yourself. So
right.
you know the importance of just that things might change and that they might not stay, and really just giving them that permission and not that expectation and
Yeah.
giving them the understanding of, hey, I'm here
Yeah.
for you on this journey if you want me. If not,
Yeah.
I'm still going to cheer you on and I still want to see you succeed.
Totally.
And
Of
I love
course.
that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that, perfection and wanting it to always go a certain way, but that the ebb and flow of life doesn't happen that way. And so you really try to honor that for yourself too. And like you said, usually when it's not a good fit for the client, that usually means not a good fit for you, and trying to just honor that. And so do you have a story or an experience, from your own journey that kind of illustrates that power of connection over perfection per se?
Yeah, I mean, I love that title, first of all. And maybe this is a good time to say this because it's been in my mind. But going back to when we met, I remember meeting you, at some of those gatherings and kind of like, I was like, this is a woman that has some self awareness, some curiosity, some insight. Like, I think I could feel that about you
Mm,
right away. And I loved that title when I noticed you coming out with that connection over perfection because I love that because it's like there is no perfection. I mean, it's sort of like we're all different beings. Even if we find somebody who has like the same values and the same raised in the same town, or who knows, like we're all different, right? So it's like, and which is part of what makes life interesting, but can also make it challenging. So I think like we're striving to connect and feel like a togetherness without that sort of pressure to be like, oh, I have to
yes.
be this way. Well, what if I'm not that way? Then what do I do?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that,
Exactly.
I really love that title that you've chosen for your work. I think it's such a it's just a beautiful way to try to live, really.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's definitely experience where I'm like, okay, I can't be perfect, and I really would rather have this connection than trying to be
Exactly.
perfect because,
Yeah.
fuck perfect. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist, but
Yeah.
in our heads
Yeah, and
still
I
we
think
try to
like
make it
and
exist.
I tell my clients this a lot, but I think some of it just comes with age. It's like I'm in my 40s. Like when we're in our 20s, our friendships are a mess and like everybody's mad at
Right.
everyone, and it's like there's something about being in your 40s that I notice across the board that there's so much more freedom for people to just be how they are, and there's so much more maturity, and like people have more language and more skills just in general. That's like what I notice, whether they're a therapist or not, because they've lived
Right.
longer. But I try to tell my clients, like I have some clients who are in their 20s. I'm like, yeah, I remember I remember that. It's hard. So
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes with expectations. Just learning about expectations and learning to kind of like let those go. And I think, like you said, in our 40s, we fucked up a lot. And so we have more grace for one another. We're like, oh, yeah, we
yeah,
know what it feels like to be in that spot. And, we know what it feels like to not really have time to reach out, but I still love you. So
yeah,
that grace and that
yeah,
understanding.
totally. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
How have you found that phrase, connection over perfection, to be valuable on your own healing journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, and you kind of just said it, but I think there's a lot of letting go of expectations that have happened for me over the years. Expectations of life, expectations of people, expectations of life turning out one way or the other. There's had to be so much letting go. And I think like for me, like developing like some health challenges, like after, I went through this really intense therapy journey, and then I felt like I was this really solid, really strong person. Then I got sick with like some
Mm,
health stuff, and that totally changed the chorus of things. And so it's like there's so much letting go, like what are like living life on life's terms rather than on my terms. And it's hard, it's still
right.
a daily practice. It's not like I've just all of a sudden just let go one day and then it was just smooth sailing. It's like a constant
Right.
practice. Like, what does it mean to let go today? I think it's a process of, and you mentioned this before too, but it's a process of listening, like to my own body.
Mm,
And even my own body, like once I developed health stuff, it sends some strange signals that I don't always understand,
mm,
right? So like listening to my own body and also like trying to let go. And it's not easy to sort of ride the waves of this life, but I find that resisting it usually causes more pain.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I love that you mentioned that. There was a few things that you said that really hit home. And one that I'm really learning is about anchoring through the storm. And that really is, talking about being mindful and using those somatics. And life is always going to be hitting us, and really being able to um, use our tools to be in it, because we can't make them go away. You've been doing this for over 20 years. I've been on my healing journey for over 10, and we are here to say that this doesn't go away. And that's
Yeah.
not what this journey is about. It's not, we're never going to be healed. We are healing, right?
Yeah.
And so to really be able to just acknowledge what's happening to us and being aware, and like, right now I'm sensing, lots of feelings of being anxious. I'm noticing that anxious feelings are coming up for me. What's happening? I love asking questions, asking, what's happening for me, right? Where do I
Yeah.
feel this in my body? What's
Yeah.
coming up? All these questions, and being able to just, for a lack of better terms, to anchor through those storms, because those storms are always going to be hitting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like you just like fix it and then you're healed and then you just move on and you never have another challenge in life. I don't think that's how it works.
Right.
Unfortunately, I don't
I
think
think
that's
we've
how
tried.
most
If it
people.
was, we would have already figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that that's the other thing, is just a really good reminder, is because, I know that there's a lot of listeners with all different, they're in all different seasons of their healing journey. And one thing that I found, even for myself, that's frustrating is like, shit, I'm back here again. It feels like I'm
Mm,
at square one.
yeah.
And that can be really frustrating and really scary and really disappointing and discouraging. And
Yeah.
what would you say to those people on their healing journey that are feeling that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard one. I've felt that often myself, like especially in the last like handful of years with some health challenges. It doesn't seem like no matter what I do and I still wake
Yeah.
up and like I eat a food and I have a reaction or just like stomach stuff or different. It's really frustrating and it can be really discouraging. And I think like I don't know, just to know that like we're not alone in that and
That's what I was going to say.
there's so many others out there in like similar situations and the same situations. And I think for me that's been the last handful of years my focus has shifted some from the personal to the kind of the collective, and I kind of look at like, wow, what's good, what's up with the planet? Like, I mean, what, like the planet is kind of a mess. Like, I mean, like I mean, there's a lot of beautiful things on the planet, but there's a lot of strife on the planet. And so I think some
Mm,
of that we feel that mirrored in our bodies. Like, is the food we're eating clean? I don't know. Like, is
mm,
the, like there's so much going on in the planet. And so I think it helps me, well, I think that can be a hard recognition. I think it helps me not take it so personally sometimes, like I think
mm.
it's like to just to know that you're not alone and that like there's so many people that going through difficult seasons, and I mean, I think if I'm pretty extroverted, so I think I've been able to create a lot of community around, healing, and that's been really supportive. And I would just encourage people to like find community, reach out, like find people that they resonate with or that going through similar things. Cause like I do think like too much isolation can be really detrimental. So
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And I was thinking exactly the same lines, is that we're not alone. You guys are not alone. We are all on this healing journey together. And I
yeah,
think that that's, one huge thing that I've really have seen a shift, is that people are more coming together as a collective,
yeah, I see
where
it.
we've
Yeah,
been so programmed to be independent. There's so many people really working to become interdependent, where we need ourselves
yeah,
and we need each other, and
yeah,
finding that balance. And so I think that that's so important. Like you said, finding community, finding safe people where, you don't have those expectations and you don't feel judged, and you could just be you. That so freeing.
Yeah.
And like you said, really being able to, take a step back and see, because we can get, I think this kind of circles back to what you were saying. If we're too much in ourselves, too much of a
Mhm.
good thing is not good
It's
anymore.
not good. I mean, I live in a
Yeah.
small space and like I have to get out every day. Like I get out for a walk, or I try to get out into nature, I try to get out and move my body or go for a drive, or just like, cuz it can feel like too much if you're just like too much in your own space and too much in your own head and whatnot, So I think it's important to move our energy too.
Yeah, that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
We'll save that for
Moving
next
our,
time.
I'm writing that down right now. Um, that's another thing I love on the podcast is usually through conversation. I'm like, okay,
You
that's
get
our
your
next
next
episode. Yeah.
topic.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And so, yeah, I definitely agree that, it's really good to be within yourself. But again, taking that step back, because we can become
Too self-focused.
like that victim mentality as well, and we can get too focused on what's happening to us,
Yeah.
and we're not able to step out and see that, hey, this is happening to so many
Yeah.
also. That doesn't negate what's happening to us, but it just gives us different
Yeah.
perspectives.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And it gives us an opportunity to talk to other
Right.
people who are going through it and maybe get, get some validation,
Yeah.
because sometimes it's hard to always validate yourself. And I
Yeah.
think that it's really important to have community and have other people that validate you,
Yeah,
and give
for
you that.
sure.
And then you learn other tools, and
Yeah.
then you meet other people, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and you laugh and you do things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to be seen and we need to have connection and we need to not feel alone in it, and I think it's like really helpful to have others on the journey.
Yeah, definitely. Jessica, thank you so much. We
Yeah,
appreciate your
so fun to
knowledge
be
and
here.
just coming on here and sharing. And now we look forward to connecting and having another episode about moving our energy with you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that'll be part 2.
yes, exactly. So, thank you so much, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great. Great to be with you.